like people in the middle class want everything, right? Like we want to.
I don't want everything
It's
lah.
okay.
Just we need
Just
to live in
many-
moderation
yeah,
lah.
just
That's what they
things.
all say. They want to live in moderation.
Yeah.
Moderation.
We want to be comfortable. We want to be enough.
Yes,
But
yeah. We don't want to be luxurious.
Welcome to the Alternative Budget Debate. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and today we have an exciting panel. Joining me is.
Hello everybody, my name is Khai.
Where are you from?
Oh, where I'm from? Singapore
What gave
lah.
you the rights to sit here and discuss today's topic?
I am a middle class citizen, that's why I'm here.
All right, my name is Tan Eun-se. I'm affiliated to NUS as well as to IPS. I teach sociology.
You're right. You're quite a prolific writer on LinkedIn, through Straits Times, and a lot of the social class research all from you.
Yeah, I try to specialize in that. Yeah.
Okay, fair. Later we'll talk a little bit more about
Sure.
it. Okay, and you?
Alright, so hi, my name is Ainul. So I am, the best way to describe myself is a tech influencer, where I talk about coding careers, tech careers, which is the hot topic, I guess, in the past 5 years or so. So in addition to that, I also volunteer a lot. So I see different groups of people who want to, for example, break into the tech industry or who want to seek better salaries. So a bit of my content lean towards upskilling and taking better charge, I guess, of your life.
So Skills Future got sponsor you now. Sure.
I partnered with them twice.
Okay. maybe just for a fun fact, I'm just curious, like how many people actually successfully transit into like a tech career?
I have no
based
idea.
on the people
Okay, maybe I know at least one person. I think she studied something related to the social sciences or humanities. I met her at an event, and then like 2-3 years later, she was like, "Hey, I remember you. I'm actually working at one of like the well-known tech companies in Singapore." And I'm like, "Wow, he actually like did it." Because usually people don't get back to me if like, "Oh, you helped me get into this industry." I'm basically like
One
a food
way.
dispenser. I'm a tips dispenser, but they don't like put money into the dispenser, you know? I'm just free advice.
Time to
Prof,
cash in lah. Time to
Yeah,
cash
yeah.
in.
So essentially what she said, right? She said sociology people end up join tech, right? There's no money to be made
No.
in sociology.
Hey, don't get me started. Don't get me started
Yeah.
on why we need why we need humanities and social sciences people, especially now with the rise of AI. Not even the rise of AI, the domination of AI. Is
Okay, yes. You want to defend your...
Well, I think sociology and all the social sciences, right, has a lot to do with imparting the idea of critical thinking, right? And I think in this day and age, right, you don't have to be very technical. You just have to understand the workplace, understand the market, right? And then from there, of course, you can learn something specific about the digital economy and some technical stuff along the way, right? But the cognitive part of it, the critical thinking part of it, I think is very essential for the kind of the world we're living in. I mean, after all, it's a knowledge economy, right? And knowledge is like the new petrol, new gas, or new whatever, right?
It's knowledge and awareness.
Does not mean
Correct.
petrol not important. Petrol is still important. Yeah. But I understand. So maybe for a start, right, there's a technical term that is floating around, which is the Gini Coefficient, right? Which I think is totally out of your wheelhouse, right? This whole sociology thing. Just help us understand, because for a period of time it fell out of fashion. The government stopped talking about it, and then now it's back in fashion. Gini Coefficient is down, blah blah blah. So actually, what does it mean for the lay?
Well, I think Gini coefficient is sort of like a very blunt instrument, right? I mean, because it actually averages a lot of things, right? So, but it is a quick snapshot of what is going on, and it's good for comparative purposes. I mean, if you want to think about where Singapore is in the world, right, comparatively, so the coefficient is a good way to capture it, right? So 0 will be perfect equality, and 1 will be perfect inequality. All right, so I think most countries will be somewhere in between, right? If you ask me about Singapore, I think I did some read up. In 2023, it's 0.433. That is before transfers, government transfers. And then it became 0.371 if you're factoring government transfers and taxes. So 0.3 plus, I think, is quite decent. In fact, it's comparative to that of Australia and New Zealand. I think it's also in the 0.3 level. But if you compare that to Northern Europe, like your Sweden, Norway, I think they're in the
Nordic
0.2
countries.
plus.
Nordic countries.
Yeah, Nordic
Yeah,
countries.
Nordic
So
countries,
0.2
yeah.
plus. So I think 0.2 is probably sort of on the high end. We are sort of in the middle. and then those your less developed countries will be something like 0.6, even 0.7. That's how it looks like internationally.
So is then 0.2 the target to go for? That means the Swedish, the Nordic way of life, right?
Well, I think if we think of Singapore, it's always wanting to be number one, right? So maybe 0.2 is the way to go.
Oh dear.
Ooh.
But even so, I think 0.3 plus is quite decent, right?
So relative to before.
Yeah, especially when you need to include government transfers and taxation, because otherwise it will be 0.4.
Can you help us understand a little bit, like what's the value of that government transfer? I mean, like it's a coefficient, right? Essentially just a number, right? But from a transfer type of view, right? Like how is it really happening? Maybe from your view of this thing.
Well, I suppose it's like you get additional funds, you'll be able to afford things that you probably can't afford, right? And at the same time, it reduces inequality, right? In other words, it allows people at the bottom to level up.
So you support the tax and spend type of methodology. I know tax and spend very loaded. Okay, I will use a different word, but in a generic sense of it. Right?
Well, I think like it or not, right? I think the acceptable model is to be progressive, right? A progressive tax system, right? I guess it's a matter of choice, like, I mean, there's nothing to say that you have to be equal. Nothing to say that, if you are poor, just too bad, or if you are rich, well, good for you, So I think there is a moral dimension involved, right? It is not something natural. It is something that is what we call socially constructed.
Okay, so do you all agree? Do you share that moral dimension, like progressiveness in the social structure, this whole like taxing the wealthy and then redistributing? Is this like the general wave of the people today?
For myself as a working parent, I think like there's definitely a lot more we can do, especially for the mid-career workers where we are facing or going through the phase of managing elder care, childcare, and also our career needs as well, right? Because there needs to be a balance of us caregiving for our parents and then also caregiving for our young ones and also maintaining the nuclear family as well. So I think like from that perspective, there's definitely room of how we can disperse it in a more diversified approach.
What does that mean? Wow, this is like keyword galore, like disperse in
that is like my corporate jargon.
Yes, please
just
tell me.
came out.
What do you want to see? Maybe from a personal viewpoint, what do you want to see the disbursement?
The disbursement will be how it can impact me as a citizen, right? Like managing like all these three aspects of my phase of life now. For instance, elder care, like how are you helping caregivers? Like I think like while that is still like quite an ambiguous concept for now, but in practice, like how does it look like for your common Singaporean, like in terms of caregiving duties, like how employees are being supported to support employees on caregiving duties for parents, for instance, and for childcare. Like I know that ACDA has been giving like a lot of like grants and subsidies for childcare fees, but like childcare in totality, like how else like can your working Singaporeans can benefit from certain fundings?
But okay, maybe one open question, right? Is do you feel the pain of the increase in taxes at this point in time, right? Because I think a lot amongst a lot of listeners and also amongst a lot of my friends, of course, we are. I'm not saying we lah, but they are clearly in the middle upper class society. That means
okay, so you have atas friends.
Many atas friends. They're all very atas. They're way more atas than me. Okay, so let me just quote MOM report, right? So MOM report, I think slightly before budget, it came out with one. Every year they will have this labor report or what labor something. It's always labor something one. Okay, so the median salary for degree holders, that means all the degree holders together, the median is about 8 point something, right? 8,100 or 8,500. I can't remember the exact number, but 8,000 something.
Yeah.
Right, that's the median wage. So if you think about it, if they are in that bracket, right, then they are really experiencing quite a bit of like more taxes, relative to where they were previously. So I think a lot of people are, at least amongst our listeners, are feeling that, right? Do you feel that? Is it worth it now? Like there's always this like middle class want to be more distributive, want to be morally correct. But then when the tax bill comes, like, oh no, this is a bit too much. Tarik a bit. Right? So like what do you think on this?
I mean, I can definitely see my income tax.
Yeah. The bill are suddenly many
like
more digits.
And I think like I'm also like trying to see how we can manage the financial aspects of the family and how we are also spending for our parents as well, right? So even though like we have like your child tax relief or parenthood tax relief, I'm not sure that I don't think that's the correct terminology, but there is like there are some form of like reliefs for parents, but I'm still seeing like quite high still. So actually what I did, right, like, just recently, I actually had to email IRAS like just to check like
You
whether
sure? You sure is this
of
price?
course, like in a more
Some more.
politically correct way, lah. Like, hey, IRAS team, are you sure like the childhood relief has been implemented in my tax as part of like tax deductions, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think like in terms of income tax relief can afford to be lower, lah, especially for your mid-career workers who are going through like I mean navigating adulthood. That's one, right, broad like
Beast,
concept.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think in terms of assisting with our fixed costs, right? In terms of like running our lives and the different roles and responsibilities that we have, I think there's definitely room for us to get more help, lah.
From a very short conversation, that the middle class is a complex beast, right? Like people in the middle class want everything, right? Like we want to.
I don't want everything,
It's
lah.
okay.
Just we need
Just
to live in
many-
moderation,
yeah,
lah.
just
That's what they
things.
all say. They want to live in moderation.
Yeah.
Moderation.
We want to be comfortable. We want to be enough. But
we don't want to be luxurious.
yeah, it's like the tricky part about defining the middle class is because
Yeah.
you have upper rich class and then you have lower poor-ish class. So there isn't. I mean, I think in the past it used to be income ceilings, right?
Yeah.
If you make this amount of income, then you fall in the middle class. But
Yeah.
now I feel it's shifted to more of where you get your income as well as what are your financial priorities. For example, people in the upper class, like they make enough money to invest like a lot. Their children has like generous allowances. They can go out with friends all the time.
Yeah.
Or the children has their pick of any school that they want to go to. While I don't like to say lower class because it sounds mean, but those who are low income, their priority is almost constantly on survival mode.
Sustenance,
The jobs are usually blue collar jobs like police, frontline workers.
Yeah, and I think like they are
construction.
also more reliant on government support.
I feel that's an interesting point,
Yeah.
right? In what I realized during the few times I've interacted as a volunteer is that there's two kinds of low income households. One of them is that they depend heavily on government subsidies, government support, but there's also the other side where they feel like they don't deserve it or they don't want to be seen as pathetic.
Yeah.
So those are the group that kind of constitute the middle lower, right? Like there's a little
Yes.
bit like
Yeah.
that's how they kind of brand.
Yes.
Okay, not say kind of brand lah. Alamak, what brand? It's more like bending from a research
Yes, bending.
perspective because the middle is broad, right? So
Yes.
So you would consider that kind of
Middle,
like,
I would say there's enough for like luxuries every now and then, like a Coldplay concert, for example. Maybe like you have enough savings, but not necessarily enough to retire early.
Yeah.
But I feel like the middle class, especially people around my age, I feel like it's a lot easier for us to waste money. For example, in the past, I'm not sure about your generation, but I know that
draw line,
when it comes to
Wow,
when it
draw
comes to
line.
housing, it's a lot more accessible. Now it's like the only way you can get housing. I think Gen Zs right now can't get housing. You have to be at least 30 years old, which is like millennial age, before you can get your own housing, or you get married, you BTO and that whole process. But either way, housing is less accessible now.
Yep.
And then you also have the rise of apps, right? Ride-hailing apps, online buying apps. So it's a lot easier, and in-app purchases, it's a lot easier for that money to drain out of your bank account.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like the phenomenon is that it's because of that, it feels like we are not living the middle class, especially people around my age, it doesn't feel like we are truly living our life because these are normal purchases. So it doesn't feel like we are privileged to be able to spend that money.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a disparity between these are the luxuries I can afford on the daily, as well as these are normal luxuries that people can afford. So I feel like that, to me, that's why even for me, I struggle between, am I with the salary that I have, am I considered as someone who is high upper middle class, or am I still like middle class?
Could I chip in here? I think one dimension that I think is missing very often is that of wealth. You see, we can measure income quite easily, but we can't measure wealth.
Yes.
All right. In any case, we don't have the data, right? That will depend on access to CPF and IRAs, right? To tell us give us the information. But it's very important because I think when the person retire, right, they could have zero income, but they can still play golf, they can still afford everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a part that we don't really capture in a lot of statistics,
Right.
Yeah, but
so you're calling out the people with like 3 condos, each 2.5 million, then no income, so fall through the cracks.
No, I mean these are the people with passive income, right? I mean,
I feel like the point that you mentioned is also very true because, for me, I didn't have any. My parents didn't get to go to university. One of my parents did go to NIE, but that isn't really university. So I went to university, landed a job in a decently paying industry, the IT space. And I feel like something that not a lot of people talk about is that it's not just income and financial wealth. It is also the social wealth that you have.
Yeah.
Networks, being able, like, for example, usually what I find a lot of entrepreneurs, right? There's entrepreneurs who are carried by their parents, like either through their networks or through their parents' investments. And then you have genuinely small business owners that see this kind of success and they're like, oh, I want to do it too. But the truth is, the difference between these two groups is one of them has enough buffer or margin for error.
Yeah.
So if a business like fails in marketing and it fails, only one of those groups will be able to start another business or go to go an alternative way, while the other one is literally like, this is their only effort. And I see more and more people in my age group.
Were you talking about net worth or networks?
Networks.
I think a mix of both, honestly.
Yeah.
It isn't just, and I feel like that's what the Gini coefficient
Right.
like is limited, right? It isn't just income.
Now let me
anymore.
add in a bit of concept here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think it's whenever we talk about class, right, there are 3 things: social capital, cultural capital, and economic capital. So we usually capture the economic, there is income, wealth, and all that, right? But social means whether we have the context and the connection.
Yes.
And we know that even in a meritocracy like Singapore, right, I think connection does matter.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure it matters.
Yeah.
Because it is from connection that you get the lobang, right?
Yeah.
Connection that you get the information.
Yeah.
And then cultural capital is the knowledge and skills. Like for example, when you're young, you get a lot of exposure to all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So you get a lot of stimulation, a lot of, opportunity to learn.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, if I may just segue your point to the whole concept of social mobility, right? I think like social capital really plays a portion of it
Definitely.
in a way
Definitely.
where, like, I think like when Ain rightfully mentioned about like maybe business owners with like generational wealth, they have like a lot more buffer
Yes.
for or higher margins for error versus like the more ground up
Like
Yeah.
me lah.
business. You may
Yeah, I very
you got
ground up,
generational
say.
wealth, what?
No lah,
Free-
say.
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a difference between entrepreneurs and
Yes.
freelancers. If that
Yes,
makes sense.
exactly. Yeah.
Can
yeah,
know
I
how
mean,
to
like,
measure.
even like for myself, right? As sorry, I need to pull in race because our
I
social
feel like
capital.
I
right?
feel like my ground is shrinking.
No,
say.
because like we are limited by social capital. I'm
Yes.
not gonna put it out like flat
Yeah,
as that.
definitely.
Yeah, and I think like for myself as a mid-career worker, I actually had to break out of like that mold of just being within
I
our
see
community.
this a lot also.
Yeah, and I think like I also saw it when I was invited as a guest speaker for Mendaki career conventions where I was engaging with a lot of like PMETs and I think like what they are really lacking is social capital that's outside of their community, and it's very lacking
Yes.
in our community itself. So I think like how I was like trying to work around it, right, is actually to brave myself to go for like networking sessions that's that's more mainstream, or just like I'm just the minority in that particular networking circle, and I think it's fine.
I think thinking conceptually, what I mean is that we have what we call bonding social capital, right? That means you
Yeah.
hang out with the
Yes,
people who are
yes.
like yourself.
Mm.
But if you only hang out in this silo, right, you're not going to have a lot of access to information
Exactly.
and network.
Yeah.
So you need a lot of what we call bridging social capital. That means you
Yes,
bridge with
correct.
other networks.
Yeah.
And there is actually in the literature in sociology, right, this thing about strength or weak ties. I wonder if you heard of that.
Strength
in
of
other
weak
words,
ties.
Yeah, I mean,
Love
it's like
it.
a paradox, right?
Yeah.
It's like you need to have a lot of weak ties.
I know.
You cannot have just strong ties, because with strong
Yeah.
ties, you are limited by your small social circle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I think actually which school you go to, it doesn't matter, right? I mean,
Yes.
assuming that you go to one of those so-called elite school, and you actually mix with people. Of course, if you don't end up not
Yes,
mixing,
yes.
I mean, nothing happens, right?
Yeah.
But if you end up mixing with those people, actually you do get a lot of connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
information that you may not, probably wouldn't get
Yeah.
if you are just in your
Even
own
if you
circle.
don't know them personally, is the idea of that, oh, I know that this
Yeah.
is something that goes on.
Yeah.
How can I
Yeah.
get into this? Like, if I didn't, I think when I was in university, there was a whole lot of talk about crypto, NFTs. I'm pretty sure that if I did not go to university, I would have never understood it. I would never even touched it. Yeah. I feel
Something
that's
rub
important.
off, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
The exposure is just
yeah.
pure exposure.
Exactly.
Sorry, I
Yes.
think additionally, right, like for your elite schools, they also have a stronger alumni network.
Yes, yes,
And it
correct.
just carries throughout like their career journey as well, which they can actually leverage whenever needed. But as compared to those without those
Yes.
Yeah.
access
Some-
and
yeah,
opportunities.
There's something
lah.
about
I feel like I'm getting
about elite
highlighted.
schools.
Yeah.
Something about
See my
elite
eyes.
schools
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
think-
get it lah.
I
I
nine,
feel
sorry.
in Singapore, right? There is there's nothing wrong in being part of an elite school, but I
Yeah.
feel like when it comes to, like, for me, I'm from mostly neighborhood schools. I thankfully I managed to get land job in IT, but I've had a chance to be at schools that are considered like elite, and the alumni networks are insane because I don't know whether it's because they genuinely were dedicated to building strong alumni networks, but I feel like another aspect of it is that Singaporeans like to feel elite. So
Right,
it's
yeah.
like when you have a brand name attached to just your presence or your attendance, it feels like, oh, I feel proud. I have this identity that I'm special. So that sort of like carries on. And like for me, what I do to try to keep grounded, even working in a high flying space like tech, is that I try to volunteer so I know like on the ground what's going on. How can I help my community, which is something that I'm passionate about. And through social media also, a lot of my social media advocacy is through a lot of my community advocacy is through social media. I have people coming up to me offline saying, oh, I saw your videos. I saw like the tips you give. I saw I went to your I went to one of your volunteer events, and I want to know more about this industry, because they don't just see me online where knowledge is very accessible, but they also see like, oh, I'm an actual person. I actually lived through the experience and I look like them, sound like them. I'm part of the same demographic. That's another aspect about social capital that not a lot of people talk about, the idea of representation and diversity. It's more than just, oh, I see myself, but it's like, I see that it's possible for someone like me. And that is something that isn't very measurable, that you can't necessarily measure through numbers. It's really sort of like a human aspect of
It's
it.
sort of organic. I
Yes.
mean, you
It
don't
is.
necessarily have to force it. In fact, you don't have to force.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
As long as you put people together and hopefully they do mix.
Hopefully
And-
they do
and
it.
some-
No, it is possible to be together and not mixing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, think about the all these wild animals and the drinking water, right?
Right.
I mean, they just do their own thing.
It's
Yeah.
like
Right.
CBD, like you walk past at lunchtime, so many people, you don't mix with them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
But you
yes,
were
yes.
all in the
Yeah.
same place.
So proximity doesn't mean that you actually mix.
Yes.
I mean, just like sometimes,
It's having a common identity
Correct.
or alignment on a certain
Yeah.
issue.
and more importantly, it's about doing things together.
Yes.
Because if you just say hello, hi, right, nothing's going to happen, right? But hello, hi, and doing things together in the community, in the workplace, in the school,
Yeah.
that is where you form networks that may turn out to be useful.
Right.
Yes.
But I want to bring back to the idea
Yeah.
of like middle class, right? So
Yeah.
what constitutes the middle class? And what is defined within the middle class? Because everybody somehow want to believe they're part of the middle class. So yeah. Anybody wants to take a jab at it.
Well, I think the dimensions will be things like, of course, income and added wealth along with it. And then things like, of course, occupation, education, and even housing. And these are not easily measurable, because like for example, you talk about education, like occupation, right? Okay, is a professional much higher than a senior manager, right? So you can't really think of it as a hierarchy, right? They're not. So the easiest actually is to measure income because it's a number, so high or low, right? Education, you can still measure university, ITE, polytechnic, and all that, right? But then again, these days, right, you also know that some people may be ITE or poly, but they're doing much better than university. So there is what we call a certain kind of discrepancy, right, between the different dimension, right? So it's really actually quite hard to measure whether you're lower middle, or upper middle, right? So a lot of it has to do with maybe subjective. That means you can also identify yourself. Where are you? Right? Who do you think? What class do you think you belong to? Right? We do that. But by and large, if you want a very sort of quick way of measuring, of course, you look at income, right? And therefore, we do consider, let's say, like the median income. So the median household income in Singapore right now is about almost 11,000.
Yeah. But
right? Household, right?
Yes.
Assuming a family, a household of 4, then divide by 4, right? So what is poverty? I think in some places, the poverty line is something like half, right? Half of the median. Depending on where you want to put it. But that is a relative poverty, right? So there's relative poverty and there's absolute poverty. So a relatively poor person in Singapore may actually be quite well-to-do in a third world country in terms of the resources and opportunities that they have, right? Yeah, but having said that, I think if you want a rough measure, I would say income is a quick way to do it. And along with that, if you can add in housing, housing would be, in my view, I think anything that is, say, 4-room and above. Again, all these are very blunt measurements. And increasingly, in terms of education, right, I would say that about almost 50% are at least tertiary educated. And tertiary means inclusive of polytechnic, diploma and university degree, right? So it's already 50%. And if you talk about occupation, PME, right? PME is also almost 50%, or maybe even slightly above 50%. So if you look at PME, then we can say that 50% of Singaporeans are middle class.
Right.
Okay. If you look at it in terms of housing, I think it's more like 70-some%. And some years ago, I think then PM Lee, right, Lee Kuan Yew was saying that 80% of Singaporeans
that is
live
quite many years ago.
many years ago.
Sorry. Okay, yeah.
But it's
so
but at the
rude.
time he was saying that 80% own their live
Housing,
in
is it?
HDB and they
Yeah.
own their flats, right?
For
And
99 years only lah.
therefore they so-called own private property.
Okay.
Right.
So-called.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is how it is. But I would say that a lot of it is income. A lot of it is actually subjective. That means you decide where you are.
Okay. So this is the academic view lah, right?
Academic view lah.
Because
Yeah.
of course you got to draw some line somewhere,
Yeah,
right? But
that's true.
Yeah.
but from a social standpoint, I think different people does kind of load it up a little bit differently, right? So how like especially the subjective side of things. So how will you define the middle class today in Singapore? Like, what does it mean to be middle class for you? Like, you can decide. Yeah.
For me?
you don't need to speak for the nation. It's
No,
okay. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not.
yeah.
I'm not. This is
Yeah.
purely based on my own perspective,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think mindset means like psychosocial.
Oh, okay. Don't throw intersectionality. I will throw you out.
Okay,
I will throw you out of this place. Yes. You know I hate those fluffy shit.
You
right?
don't know?
Yes, please.
I love it.
Fluffy.
Fluffy. Yes. Come tell me what,
Yeah.
maybe you describe a little bit.
And also opportunities as well.
maybe we
Yeah.
can describe a little bit. Like, what does
Yeah.
it mean to, like, what is a middle class life? How does it feel like?
I think there are two aspects. One is financial well-being and also mental well-being as well.
Yeah, please come for our event on the 23rd of March at OCBC.
So for financial well-being,
Financial well-being festival.
Right.
Okay.
So I think like for financial well-being, I think we definitely need to educate ourselves in terms of financial literacy, on how we are managing our expenses, family expenses. If like for instance, hey, like for this month we have been like eating out like more than usual, like maybe we need to cut back like the subsequent months, and then we need maybe to cook at home like more often now. So I think like managing your fixed costs at home, I think it's very vital in order to sustain. So the second one is mental well-being. I think there's correlation. There's correlation in a way where, for instance, you don't manage your financial health, you're gonna fight with your spouse, and then that's gonna lead to arguments at home, and then how does that like impact your marriage, and how does that like impact like you raising your child?
Somewhere,
I think like
somewhere there
it's-
is a Maslow hierarchy of needs.
yes,
Okay,
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so for I mean to keep things short, like I'm just focusing on these two aspects, like financial and mental.
What I see as a middle class individual would be someone that maybe they have a full-time income somewhere, but they might also have a side hustle because they are able to get a stable income that can still support, their basic needs, housing, all that kind of stuff. But they also crave independence. So they want to be able to at some point, independently make money without depending on an employer to micromanage them lah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that a middle class individual would have, how the basic can afford housing, they can afford their own transport, they have their own car, or like they always commute. I feel like, and maybe they basically have enough disposable income to save for the future. So whether that's investing or saving up to pay something in cash, which isn't the same for someone of a lower income class where they are almost constantly on survival mode, budgeting every single cent, and versus someone who is on the upper class where they don't have to think about budgeting and they don't need to worry about making money because they're already making enough money either passively or through through employing people essentially.
Right, that means you are not at the level where you gotta pinch a penny. Right? But neither are you at the level where you don't need to care about it at all.
Yeah.
Right? So you're kind of there, you're sufficient.
Yeah.
You know that every month, as long as your job is there, things will be fine. You can
Like
plan
right
for
now
the
it's
future.
okay, but once I retire and I cannot be, and I
that
literally
one a
cannot
bit
be
more
employed
stress,
now,
right?
that one is where you have to think about,
Okay,
like
okay,
that. Like
okay.
that's when you have to think about the future.
You have to think about retirement, financial adequacy,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think middle class is also whether if government means testing, right? You are excluded. After they do the means
Yes,
testing,
I
you're
agree
excluded
that
from
one.
whatever welfare or whatever benefits, right?
Right.
I think this is where we talk about, some people call it the sandwich class, but although I prefer not to use that term.
Yeah.
I think it's more like what they will term the middle class squeeze, right? In other words, you don't really get a lot of the benefits, but neither are you rich.
Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of disposable income. I mean, you manage.
It's the people that usually complain about 5% plastic bag lah.
Yeah. It's,
5 cent plastic bag.
it's on the line. It's on the line,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's really quite hard to determine where exactly is the line where middle class starts.
Okay,
Right?
okay,
And,
fair.
Yeah.
Fair. So then, in other words, I don't hear anything about the 5 C's. Right? So in other words, all those things, like the
5
consensus...
years in this economy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, as in, so I'm trying to understand because I think for a long period of time, that was the aspiration of so-called the
Yes.
middle class,
Yeah.
right?
Every
Like,
composition.
yeah. But I mean, in recent times, I don't know if it's because people have kind of, cannot attain, so don't do it anymore, or the government has done some sort of refresh as to what is considered middle class, or like where are we?
Well, I think we're talking about the Singapore dream, right?
Yeah,
For the longest time, we equate Singapore dream to the 5 C's, right? And 5 C's, apart from cash, condo,
Credit
apartment,
card, I think.
private
Credit
car,
card, yeah.
Country
credit
club.
card, and country card. But I think the last two are actually not so relevant these days.
Yeah, because
Who-
country club closing
Who
down.
care
right?
about
Yeah.
country club membership? Nobody cares, right? And what's the other one again?
Credit card.
Credit card, come
Yeah,
on, everybody
everyone
has
can
it,
get
and we
it,
have more
yeah.
than one, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
thing that still remains important will be cash, condo, apartment, and private car, right? And cash is of course fundamental.
Yeah.
With your cash, you can do the other two,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that is still the Singapore dream. I know we say that maybe Singapore dream is now about mental health and all kinds of other things, right? Meaningful life and all that. But I think boils down to still the material. The
Yeah,
material still
definitely.
matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't get away from that, right?
So you disagree with the mental health, all those things?
No,
Like to you, these are the clearer barometers of what is considered a good.
No, I'm just saying that, I think the material still matter. It is a necessary condition. Okay. I mean, it may not buy you happiness, but without it, you don't even have the necessary condition. Right? You can't be poor and say, hey, I'm living a very meaningful life. It's hard to do that. I mean, you can force yourself to think like that, but I think you still need something. You can't live with nothing, right?
I would
Yeah.
argue that the country club C is still relevant, but not as a country club, but in terms of social validation, whether that's on social media or like I feel like social media is the easiest example to give. Recently, I think there's this whole fiasco about Stanley Cups.
Oh my god, that was what came into my head.
Okay, basically,
Right.
your NS water bottle, simple. So like imagine that, but super prettified. By right, Stanley cups are supposed to be sustainable. It's supposed to be reusable compared to, disposable cups. But now it's become like a status symbol.
Yeah.
Oh, we need to get the limited edition ones. There's literally people fighting over Stanley cups. And now and then on social media, there's people showing their whole collections of the exact same cup times 12, times 20. And then it comes down to social validation, right? Because if you can afford a Stanley cup, then it's like, oh, I have a Stanley.
Right. How much is one Stanley cup?
I think at some point it was $50.
Yeah, it's not a lot lah. It's just Americans very poor lah. Okay, full stop.
But it's still that social validation part.
Yeah.
Social media has made social validation a lot more necessary, a lot more vital. Like if you are not on social media, or if you don't see it on social media, you're not valid.
Okay.
Yeah.
But can I sort of respond to that, right? It's like, I
That you
think
have
if
a
you are
Stanley
very
cup?
rich, hold it.
Okay.
If you are very rich, right, you can actually afford to dress down.
That's
Right? You can wear your chakra.
You don't have to
or whatever.
show off.
Yeah, you don't
basically.
have to. It's only when you are poor that, or maybe say a lower middle class, then you try to put on your accessories and all that, right? I mean, you probably need that.
So is this a well-documented social phenomenon?
Have you
I
seen
don't
Mark
think I have
Zuckerberg?
empirical data, lah. But what I'm saying here is that you are so confident that you can dress any way you want and still feel good about yourself.
No, but I agree with you. I think from an anecdotal standpoint, I see a lot of this.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I was curious whether did anybody collect the data that this is how it is. Okay.
Back to I think that goes back into like financial. What are your financial priorities? Because once you reach that kind of like income class, right? You're like, oh, it's not just I don't care about what I wear, but it's more of like there's more important things that I can focus on. Like, oh, I want to buy more houses. I want to invest more in stocks. Not necessarily, oh, I need to get the next luxury shirt, for example, next luxury bag.
Okay. So then what is the Singapore dream then?
Singapore dream for myself.
Yeah, what is the Singapore dream? If 5C is, from what Answer say, 5C is still kind of relevant. It's maybe not the talk of the town, but the basics material level has to still be there.
Oops, sorry.
Right? So then, what is the Singapore dream to you? So and I think what I'm trying to do is to equate the middle class aspiration as the Singapore dream, right? Essentially, that's kind of how it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the Singapore dream to you today?
For myself is to be self-sufficient, that's one. And for the family as well. Of course, like I would like to raise my kids in a way where there's equal opportunity for him. And there's also like that buffer like for me to invest, to also ensure that I'm also saving up enough for my retirement, be it like through CPF, voluntary contribution, or like other investments, and also to ensure that like that the family has a roof to live in, and there's also like that access for comfort, like travel. Mostly travel, because I'm actually quite a travel buff. Or like at least
I know. The trip off very
and
long
the fact
and very
that
fancy
we need to increase like the air ticket prices because Singapore is
because we want to
encouraging a
choose to
carbon
use
free.
cooking oil to burn, right? For some weird
Yeah.
reason. Okay.
Yes, so we also need to factor that.
Okay,
as
wait.
well,
So
yeah?
I want to hold you there, right?
Yeah.
So to you, that is a dream. You haven't achieved it. Or you are already achieving it. If you're achieving it, then is that a dream, or are you living the dream? You know what I mean?
Wow, that's a very tricky question. eh?
Yeah. So I want to know, right? Like is that a dream? You know what I mean? Of course we can. We don't
Okay,
need
lah.
to-
That's
yeah.
not a dream. That's not quite a
It's a
dream.
goal.
But I think like I think I'm already stepping to that level.
Okay, that's
But
good.
of course, you also need to buffer for inflation, GST increase.
Is an important thought process,
Right.
because a lot of people, after they achieve something like that, then they achieve the Singapore dream in their head, right? Then they become lost. They don't know what to do. Right? It's also quite common amongst the working professionals.
Like graduating from
Yeah,
university.
after they work 10, 20 years, they've accumulated and they have hit the Singapore dream. Then it becomes a question of like, what's next? Then it becomes a different set of struggles, right? So just want to be
But of
clear
course,
on
like I think after you have attained the Singapore dream, right, then you will have other considerations as well. Like for instance, if you're progressing in your career path and then you reach like a certain level, right? And then at like 40 or like 45, for instance, like because when I was speaking with like my mentees, they are worried about like, hey, are we still relevant professionally if when we hit like 45, like especially within like the media industry, for example, like So I think like there's other factors that we will need to consider and also evolve from the Singapore dream to sustenance now. Yeah. So I feel like
So it's
while
not just
there's
about
like a
hitting-
cap, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you want to continue hitting there, right? And
Yeah.
the struggle is that.
The struggle will be sustaining it.
Continuation.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. Interesting. And what about your thoughts? Is there do Gen Zs have a different view of like what is considered the middle class?
I think it's like 50-50 what Khai said. For me, it's two parts. For as an individual, I want to reach a point where I don't have to worry about money. Like I have enough in my investments to give me passive income, and I would be able to, pursue whatever I want without having to worry about the price tag attached to it. But I also have to think about my parents, my family, right? I think I'm firmly in the generation of what was it called? Is it the sandwich generation where you're supporting your own family as well as supporting your parents?
Yeah.
So I feel like more and more people are getting into that, and for me, and I see that for me also. So I can't completely say, oh, I want to achieve my dream. I've made it. I also have to think about my parents, my family, my siblings. One of whom is still like studying. I have to, even though like I'm Gen Z, still relatively young, I have to already think about like these considerations from a family/community standpoint. I think I also want to reach the point where I can support at least the basic necessities of my family, like basic utilities.
So to you,
them.
that is a Singapore dream. I'm asking about the Singapore dream. Like, so
to me, yes, that is the Singapore dream because everything's expensive. But that and I feel also like I think everyone is worrying about like being able to afford their basic necessities while also wanting
caring for others, I suppose.
Not just caring for others, but just FOMO lah. They don't want to miss out on cool things that they want to do, but at the same time they feel like they have to save up every penny, which I'm still struggling with it myself. So to me, my Singaporean dream is being able to do what I want while also supporting the basics of what my dependents need.
Wow, interesting. Interesting that is a dream.
At this point, I'm still like relatively young.
No. I get it. No. I mean, that is it reflects the considerations of different groups, right? Yeah. So that's quite interesting. Okay, so then maybe I want to go further into like, so there are all these policy changes that came out, this year, right? Whether is it skills futures, whether is it change in the ERA, enhanced retirement ARS and non-retirement scheme for CPF, whether is it a change in some of the property tax banding, for the NAV. Like, what are some of the things that you believe was good and it helped to achieve that Singapore dream?
I feel for me, because a lot of my content is catered around upskilling and career switching, right? I feel like the skills future, for older workers, for ITE graduates to pursue a diploma, I feel like that's always a good move because I still believe that education is one of the most vital yet expensive luxuries one can have. But I feel like my worry also is, yes, we are building a people that is effective, efficient, but I feel like part of that budget could also be dedicated towards uplifting our well-being as well.
So you don't feel like any part of the budget elevated your well-being, or like is targeted at doing it?
I feel like it's targeted a lot towards career goals and finances, which is fine, which is like the basics. I feel like that is an important point. But I also feel like for example, a lot of criticism for skills future credits is like, oh, what's the point of having all these credits if I don't have time, if I cannot commit to that course. And a lot of courses that, let's say, will help you land a career, they are the kinds that are like months long.
Yes,
so how can you afford the time for that, right? That's one aspect. And another aspect is like, okay, I won't talk about like how some course providers, they are just in it for the money. But it's like being able to have the luxury of time and money to go for additional courses is one thing. But what about the other aspects of pursuing a side hustle that that isn't considered for. For example, for me, it's like mental health. I think recently there's this initiative called Mindline, where they want to help youth ambassadors be able to give
I saw that. It's quite
mental
cute.
health mental health resources essentially, which I feel like it's important, and more budget should go towards that, because I feel like we've already reached a point where everyone and their grandmother know that going for the right career, earning a good salary is important, but not necessarily enough about taking care of your mental well-being and your mental health. Because once your tech runs out of energy, of money, then you are just not going to make very smart decisions. You're not going to be able to feel safe, and at some point you're just going to crash. You're going to burn out.
Fair. And to be fair, there's no reporting on the mental health thing.
It's limited, and I feel like it's still a huge stigma about mental health.
I don't think it's a stigma, right? I think the government has already accepted it, and they made a whole spiel before the parliament. Before this budget debate, there was a whole thing already, and I actually agree with the with the government's approach to this. It's not to institutionalize the whole thing, but to do every other thing on top of setting up a broader public infrastructure around mental health support, right? So that's a different discussion, but I do agree that I was quite puzzled why the budget never thought about it, but slightly before that there was a discussion on this, right? So maybe in a few months' time we will see more of that, right? Hopefully that comes.
Well, could be in the second installment.
Okay, yeah, because this is the first installment.
Oh, interesting.
Second installment
Clearly, I need
to
to
forward
watch
Singapore.
parliamentary stocks more.
It's okay. This is part of my job, so I watch it a lot. So what about you? Is there particular?
Well,
thing?
my view is that the budget is very much about being future ready, right? I mean, the assurance package is more for the present, maybe the next couple of years, But early childhood education, and then training for mid-career people, and then retirement financial adequacy for seniors. I think this is all about the future. These are all about the future, right? And I think we really need to prepare for the future, right? After all, Forward Singapore is actually not just about now, right? But about years to come. The next 20, 30 decades, 3 decades.
But from your view just now that you've established that material accumulation is still important, right? So the 5 C's on some level is still important for the people, but are the policies now continue to facilitate this accumulation process?
Yeah, I mean, like it or not, I think training, jobs, and earning a good income, I think is still very much basic, right? We can't just go ahead and talk about mental health and meaningful life, right? Without even talking about money. I think we have to talk about money. I mean, that's a reality. And even all these benefits that we are giving out, welfare and all that, right, needs funding. And for that reason, that's why we have GST, we have all this taxation, right? I mean, much as we don't like it, but it costs money.
Fair.
I think if I may echo, Ain will be the Singapore Skills Future, where Q4 last year I was actually taking my ECLP certification in adult training,
very
and
stressed. Come and tell me, I need to do presentation tomorrow. Very stressed.
Yeah, so it was a pretty intense 3 months training, but I think it's good that with this budget announcement they are reinforcing the importance of reskilling and upskilling, because then I would also, it also makes me think that whatever my efforts were in Q4 is gonna be doubled down in terms of government efforts, in terms of ramping up adult trainers or adult students. Basically, adult students are your PMETs who are upskilling essentially. So I think then that also gives me the opportunity to probably start a side hustle where maybe I could do more trainings in institutions as a freelance adult trainer, facilitator. So I think that also gives me assurance that the market for adult education is gonna thrive in the next few quarters.
I will challenge you to that, because the government say they will scope. So likely the 4,000 extra, right?
Yeah.
That one will go into Institute of Higher Learning.
For
so
sure,
your
for
poly
sure.
endowments and all those things will get bigger. But I don't think it will enter the private market. Right? But the details are not out yet.
Yeah.
Right? So let's see.
Exactly.
We'll see. But what about from your own, because that one, it will help a lot of the mid-career people that kind of moving along, right? But for you, at this current situation of your life, which you have kind of said that, actually you are already kind of on the dream, right? You've already achieved it. Now it's about continue to achieve this. But you see your tax bill keep going out, right?
Yeah.
so what is your, how do you feel like some of the policies, like, or is there something that you think like, hey, not part of the discussion, I pay so much but don't have, like I would like to see more so that I can continue this middle class good life and Singapore dream?
I think what's lacking will be, which I thought like at least they could consider, will be the parental shared leave.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think
What's
like
the current situation?
that the fathers can actually take on like the maternity leave, but it's only going to be only a week out of like their 4 months, I think.
So you feel like it should be the
I think like
same.
it's a little bit limiting like for us to be part of like the journey, especially like the early phases of like the newborn. And that leaves us limited flexibility to be able to maneuver and how we intend to use our leave as well. At least like with a parental shared leave, it's actually up to us to plan and manage like, okay, maybe during like the first couple of months, like at least like the fathers can actually be more hands-on. And I think like there's like all talks about gender equality,
but no action.
I didn't say no action. I said how about like equal parenting
fair
policies.
Fair.
So that will be it lah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe in a few years after the new tax code settle down, you kind of see what's the income stream, then you will see some of these things. That's how I feel lah. Yeah. Any last things to add about the budget or anything you hope to see?
I think to add on to what you say, right?
Yeah.
I think the employers also need to buy in, right? Because when you talk about all this leave, right? I think one reason why guys, fathers tend not to take the leave is because there's KPI, right? You got to make sure that you deliver.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you can go on leave. Yeah, by all means, go on leave. But what happened to your career? Right. So, I think that also has to be made more reasonable. Okay.
Maybe I want to push a little bit on that, right? Do we want to move into a society where it's a single income earner society again, right? Because we talk about all the family thing, right? And it's a bit of a complex intersection because the median income is not enough to meet the good, so-called good quality of life. I mean, you need both parties to be working to live that kind of life that I think what we can confidently say what a lot of middle class wants. But now then there's a big shift and like, parenting, take care of your kids, blah blah blah. So are we as a society, do we want to move there?
I think in the old days, right, when we were much poorer, in fact the father is the main and only breadwinner. Yeah. And the mother is the housewife or the homemaker, right? Yeah. But then the thing is that with female participation, female going to a higher education, right? So it becomes a dual income family. And I think you need that because if you want to sustain your middle class lifestyle on the higher end, you need both to be working. Okay, you can't help it, but do that.
Okay, so that is a definitive point at this point in time. Okay, cool. Any last things you want to add?
I feel like an interesting thing is like 5-10 years ago, whenever someone talks about dual income parents, right, it's like, oh, poor thing, they have to work.
Life's so hard, right?
Life's so hard. But now the interesting thing is on social media, there's basically a whole phenomenon called DINK, dual income, no kid. And it's perceived as a lot more positive because they're living it up. They don't have
serious.
Kids. Yeah. If you search up DINK, you will see there is a lot of people like, oh, I have no kids. I don't have to worry about crying babies and that kind of stuff. But I feel like that's. Then I feel like the difference between the two is the idea of independence. Like I as someone who has dual income, no kids, we can treat ourselves independently. It's our money is our money. But when you have, for example, kids at play, then it isn't so much as it's a bad thing, but it's more of like, oh, I have to think. I can't purely think about myself. I can't independently think about myself. I have to think about other people in my circle. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's a concern for a lot of middle working class professionals. Yeah. So yeah, we will do an episode about DINK. Okay, let's get a few other people on. Thank you for your time. Thank you. All the best for the year.
Okay.
And,
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate. Awesome. Nice.